I will do my best to admit people while I speak. Natalia has some other commitments this morning, but I will do my best. Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Carlos Barreto. I am the NETSOB coordinator. And today I have a few different but quick updates on NETSOB before we jump into the discussion by the working group chairs and members. So this was sort of missing yesterday, the structure of NetSub. So this diagram summarizes that well. It's also on the website. Our chair is Brajesh Singh. I'm the coordinator. Then we have three observers that are external to the FAO. We have Lina Villanen with the GSPI. We have Monica Kobayashi with the CBD. And we have Georges Zana with ITPS. And we have three working groups. Working group one, George Brown and Carlos Guerra. Working group two, Zoe Lindo and Jeff Battigelli. And working group three, we have, it's, as I said yesterday, it's a merge between four and three formerly. So Gianluca Bagnara and Giulio Melorgio, and Rosalina Gonzalez and Luca Montanarella. Uh, Now, that diagram will be updated very soon because I'm happy to announce the results of the election for the vice chair of our three working groups. The vice chairs will have time later to briefly talk about their plans. So congratulations are in place for Dr. Cesar Marin from Chile, who won most votes on to act as the vice chair of working group one. Welcome, Cesar. Welcome back for Jeff Battigelli from Canada, who was the alternate of Working Group 2 and now has been voted to act as the chair. Congratulations, Jeff, and thanks for joining us at 4 in the morning. Another welcome back to Gianluca Bagnara from Italy, who is the currently vice chair of Working Group 3, and who will be returning to it. Few more updates. First, I'd like to see more engagement from the members when it comes to the newsletter that I send every month. So on the left, it's just an excerpt of the last edition. This is the space, guys, for you to call for collaborations, call for data, announce soil biodiversity events, and advertise positions. And on the right is a map that I maintain with the information of all of our members. If you haven't seen this yet, it is on our website. And go take a look and find yourself in there. As I said yesterday, we have more than 1,100 members currently. And with this map, members are able to see who else is part of the network as well as part of each of the three working groups and where they are located. I update this map once a month, so please don't panic if you just don't see yourself there yet. That will happen. But if you do have updates or any questions about that, please write me an email instead of submitting a new form as a new form of enrollment to the network. Okay, now an invitation. The 13th plenary assembly of the GSP will take place in Rome between June 3rd and 5th of this year at the FAO headquarters in Rome, but also online on Zoom for those connecting remotely. More details will come soon, but several events will highlight the work on land and soil by FAO and also by its partners. A call for side event proposals will be on FAO's website when the time comes, so keep an eye out for that. And it's also a special one because it's FAO's 88th anniversary, so it will be an exciting event. Lastly, I'd like to draw your attention to a special issue organized by NETSOB and led by George Brown with the help of Jacob Parnell, the previous NETSOB coordinator. And it has 8 articles plus one editorial paper, all of them under copy editing right now, and all of them will be open access. So the topics covered include notes on knowledge on soil biodiversity currently worldwide, bibliometric analysis on ecosystem services provided by soil biodiversity, updates on soil biodiversity spanning different organism body sizes from micro to megafauna, one paper on the potential threats to soil biodiversity led by working group number 2, and 2 articles with information on GLOSOB. You're going to hear more about some of these updates today. With that, I would like to thank you. That was just a brief introduction to the day. I wish everyone a very productive meeting and discussion, and I will ask, is George around? Yes, I see George there, and I am gonna, the way this is gonna go today is that everyone is muted just so that there's no interruptions during the talk, and I am gonna ask whoever is talking to unmute themselves, so you should be able to talk now, George. George is gonna start talking, providing updates on working group number 1. I see Carlos is also around. And then during his time slot, there will also be an opportunity for discussion, and the floor will be open to all the members. So please raise your hand, and I will ask you to unmute yourself. Take it away, George. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me, Carlos?
I can. I don't see your
Great.
screen, full screen yet, but now I do.
All right. I hope that's okay. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be sharing with you all here this morning, this afternoon, this evening, what we've been doing over the last few years regarding Working Group 1, which is on measuring and monitoring soil biodiversity. I'd like to, first of all, thank my co-chair, Carlos Guerra, for his support on many occasions, and I will also let him take the other half of this period of our presentation to talk about updates, important updates regarding what we've been doing and what we plan on doing over the next few years, particularly with the help of our new co-chair, vice chair. So welcome, Cesar. Great to have you on board. And I'd also like to thank my scientific committee members and all the other members who have gratefully accepted to participate in some of the activities that we've been proposing. So I'd like to thank particularly Maria Tsafuli from Greece, Hannah Karuri from Kenya, Braj from Australia, and Kati Slavics from the USA for their help on various occasions, and I will be sharing with you a little bit of what we've been up to. You've seen some of these things over the last few presentations of the NETSOB, but I'd like to go back and say, well, what is it that was proposed over the first phase, and then sort of how we moved forward to achieving some of those goals, not all of them. But the first one, I think we've achieved successively. We have a pretty good group, almost 500 members in Working Group 1, which are experts involved in soil biodiversity worldwide. And basically, these are people who are our human resource to move forward to implementing GLOSOB worldwide, or the Global Soil Biodiversity Observatory. So it's great that this is the working group with the highest number of members. And we are certainly looking forward to interacting more with you all. And so Cesar has this big challenge, but he's certainly up to the task, and it's great to have him as the new vice chair. We did also have proposed in this first phase the development of methods to measure, monitor, and assess soil biodiversity, particularly using well-known indicators to facilitate the monitoring of soil biodiversity status and loss. And that was sort of the proposal for the Global Soil Biodiversity Observatory, which was launched in Montreal a few years ago, as you all are aware. And also we did some work regarding assessing the current ability to perform monitoring, assessment, and measurement of soil biodiversity worldwide. And so we identified some knowledge gaps. We identified the capacity of countries using various methods. And we also aimed to provide evidence to support better decision-making regarding the conservation and sustainable use of soil biodiversity. So what we actually did manage to do over the last few years was to design a guidebook. And of course, not much has been moving forward regarding that. So I have to apologize to the many people who very gratefully and excitingly said, yes, I want to participate. And then we haven't really been moving forward very much on that lately, but there'll be more news on how we can all contribute to that in the near future. And we also supported on various moments GLOSOLAN, the Global Soil Laboratory Analysis Network of the FAO, activities which involve standardizing methods, harmonizing methods worldwide for adoption in the over 700 labs that are participating in GLOSOLAN worldwide. Then we did this assessment of the global capacity, as I just mentioned, and proposed a tier system for adoption of the Global Soil Biodiversity Observatory to basically assess the specific and the practical basis, the methodological basis for the adoption of the Global Soil Biodiversity Observatory worldwide. So I'll go into a little bit into each of these in the next few slides. Many of you proposed to join as authors and co-authors of chapters of the Methods Handbook. That handbook includes or included, in a sense, the strategies, the sampling strategies, issues related to the design and implementation of monitoring programs in country, worldwide, methods for practically all of the taxa, going from microorganisms, microbes, archaea, bacteria, fungi, etc., through microfauna, mesofauna, macrofauna, and megafauna. There were methods related to standard methods related to soil functions that are intimately related to soil organisms and also to soil health. And finally, there was a part related to the GLOSOB proposal, i.e. the proposal for the Soil Biodiversity Observatory. There were several modifications requested and adjustments by the GSP and the FAO related to this handbook. It was mainly associated with the possibility of using existing standardization efforts such as those of GLOSOLAN and also of SoilBon, which has been working on this for quite a while. So I'll let Carlos Guerra share a little bit more about this in the future and why in his presentation and why we have been moving forward in terms of using existing standardization and methods for that that are already underway. So we also had interaction with GLOSOLAN in terms of joining some of their meetings, some of their training sessions, and proposing revision of some of the methods. Some of these methods are already published. Some of these methods are already available. Those in green here, the microbiome respiration, the enzymes. Some of them are still being revised by the authors in terms of their contents. So they all go out for review. And so some of these are still being finalized. Those related to nematodes, the biological quality of soil QBS related to soil microarthropods is also in review. And that for macrofauna based on hand sorting. There was also a questionnaire which was prepared to send out to all the labs worldwide to assess their capacities to actually process biological samples. Most of these labs are quite familiar with the physical and chemical soil analysis, but not so much the biological. So there was a need to assess what was being done where and how well they could actually bring in new analyses, particularly related to soil biology, soil biodiversity. So that was sent out, and we're waiting then to assess how we can move forward in terms of capacity building for these GLOSOLAN labs worldwide. So there was a recommendation also here by the GSP in terms of using SoilBon protocols and SOPs and move forward with those, particularly because, as you'll see with Carlos Guerra, his presentation, there's been a lot that's been done in terms of this over the last few years. And so there is no need to reinvent the wheel. So we did do an assessment worldwide as part of some of the FAO agreement with Embrapa in terms of how to see what the status is of the monitoring, mapping, measuring, inventorying of soil biodiversity worldwide. There was also a survey that was sent out that was filled out by many of you. And it revealed that, yeah, there's actually many countries that have monitoring and inventories, but few of them have both. And even few of them are addressing a wide range of taxa at the same time. So there's many countries that are doing inventories and monitoring, but not of a wide range of taxa. Many of them, most of them, more than 60% of those are only doing microbes. And there's a lot of them doing fauna, but very few of them doing everything, which is kind of what the objective is of the Global Soil Observatory, is just have a better assessment of the status quo in terms of what's present, not just of microbes, but also of fauna, and have a better idea of how the different land uses are also affecting soil biodiversity. So there are a few sites that have this detailed knowledge, which is required to make adequate decisions in terms of sustainable use and conservation. So how can we protect what we don't know? Well, and also we need to be able to measure that adequately. So in terms of the protocols, as I mentioned, there's this great experience with SoilBond. Monica talked about this a bit yesterday. There's also the C4 experience that Lee shared yesterday, which they're doing some interesting things. The nice thing about SoilBond is that it's multi-taxa, it's wide-ranging, it's all over the world. There's these methods, there's this capacity building activities, there's tutorial videos, and it's expandable. As I said, I won't do the spoiler here for Carlos, so I'll let him talk more about this. There's definitely benefits of using ongoing activities like SoilBond to move forward in terms of the Global Soil Biodiversity Observatory. So there's definitely room for expansion. And of course, there are some obstacles to overcome. I'll let Carlos share about how they've overcome those and how moving forward in a great way to help GLOSOB activities worldwide as well. So the objectives then of GLOSOB is really to be this observatory that can provide global soil biodiversity observatory data, biodiversity data for guiding efficient evidence-based decision making. And the goal then is to monitor and forecast the condition of soil biodiversity and how human activities impact it and also the provision of soil ecosystem services. So this is a country-driven effort. So countries are responsible for moving forward, for doing the monitoring, for doing the measurement, for using standard methods, and for providing the resources that both human and infrastructure to move forward. And of course, this depends on the ability of the countries to do so, both in terms of what's available. And so we did this assessment initially using publications on soil biodiversity over an 11-year period. And we found that really there are highly variable results with level 3 countries, for instance, are those countries that are able to do it right away and to start monitoring immediately. So this is those that are in green, and those that are in yellow are those that might need some assistance in terms of capacity building or infrastructure. And those in level 1 are those with currently limited capacity, countries that either didn't have any monitoring programs at present or need both building of infrastructure or people capacity building to initiate this. Of course, this is based on publications of tier 1, and I'll go into what is tier 1, which is the sort of the basic soil biodiversity variables associated with GLOSOB. And so we did this assessment based only on this 11-year period, which is now a little bit outdated. So this needs updating and needs a reassessment at the national level with local soil biodiversity experts so that this can be updated. Like Uruguay here shows up as it's level 1. It's definitely not level 1. They're already involved in soil bond activities. So there's definitely some updating needing, and this will be, of course, the assessments that will be done at the national level to assess what they can do. The level 1, the tier 1 indicators or the tier 1 variables are those related to enzymatic activity, mesofauna, soil microbiome, microbial biomass and respiration, and then, of course, an assessment of diversity of microbes and fauna using mainly sequencing data. And then, of course, as you go into level 2, tier 2, it starts involving more taxonomic or bioinformatic sequencing information to assess other taxa, other functions, and other variables that are important for soil functioning and soil health. So the assessment here, the ability to do these tier ones is something that's going to have to be done at the national level as they choose which variables they're going to, what level of tiers they're going to adopt, where they're going to do the work, which sites, which ecosystems are going to be included, as they assess what is the capacity building needs, the infrastructure needs needed for that. And so this is that planning phase where then they go, okay, once that's been done, they can go to the execution phase. They can start doing the monitoring, collecting the data needed, where they're going to store it, what the sharing policy is going to be. And then as they move forward to actually doing things over the long term, how is that going to be funded over the long term? What are the things that are needed to maintain that monitoring program over the long term? So I won't go into this because I'll let Cesar share then what are some of the objectives of the second phase, but basically this means continuing the assessment methods, developing the capacity building programs and schemes, and defining then the networks for long-term monitoring to improve the soil quality, data quality, and availability. And this will be particularly important as we go into the next phases of teaming up with other initiatives, such as the International Network Soil Information, the Laboratory Network, Analysis Network that I mentioned of GLOSOLAN, and of course, SoilStat and GLOSIS, which are also for data policy and data exchange. So I thank you for your attention, and I'll let Carlos go on to his presentation. And thank you very much for your attention. And thank you all for your help over the last few years. Of course, I also thank my institutions who have supported me through these efforts and the moments that I was vice chair of this working group one. So thanks again, Carlos. Off to Carlos Guerra, actually, not Carlos.
Thanks. Thanks,
I
George.
got it. Carlos one, Carlos two. Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you.
So thank you. I don't have a formal presentation, but I will build on what George just showed. So first, I would like to just to clarify one of the questions in the chat from Victoria. While FAO has traditionally has focused on agriculture, we are developing a monitoring system that is for soils, and soils are everywhere. It's not only for agriculture; it's for all types of land use types, which includes also urban systems. Yeah, so it's not necessarily for specifically agriculture, but it's for different agricultural types. But it's also for different forest and nature types, also pastures and urban areas. And this was the philosophy behind when we developed Soil One and when we are now progressing this to GLOSOB. The other aspect that I would like to highlight in our journey over the past few years was that, as George said, we originally intended to published a guideline for different types of methods with the participation of everyone. And this is still on the table, but doing this as a co-construction exercise, it's typically more enriching, but it's also typically less longer. So it's not, the results don't come as fast as one would like. But in parallel to this, we developed an assessment of global assessment of conditions and capacity in different countries to actually proceed with this monitoring, because the idea is to have a decentralized monitoring framework, not necessarily that everyone sends their samples to a place, but that everyone has their own, so every country would have their own monitoring system and participate of this global effort in a way to validate and also to allow for the comparison between countries using potentially slightly different methods. Yeah. So having that in mind, in that assessment in mind, what we decided to do in parallel to this was to target countries with the least capacity currently, or with the least and moderate capacities currently, and provide them with training to build up capacity at this level. So at least to improve the way that these countries and our colleagues in these countries are able to conduct soil surveys, assessments, lab procedures, and so on. And I'm happy. So we are in this final stage to agree this with FAO, but I'm happy to tell you all that FAO and Soilbond have agreed to do a training capacity building exercise targeting specifically these countries. It will work as a pilot. So right now, the current set of countries that we will target is Uzbekistan, Togo, and Costa Rica. But the idea is to extend this or to allow other colleagues from countries that are in this lower tier to be able to participate. The idea of providing training is exactly to build up capacity at a local scale. What we want, or we never wanted to have a single global monitoring system for soils. What we need is local researchers, local technicians, local institutions to be able to provide their own capacity, because everyone in myself in my country, and every one of you in your own country, you are the ones that know exactly what is happening in your countries, the differences in land use types, the differences in conservation techniques, and so on. And this has to be really fitted to the location itself. Yeah. So the idea is to have, again, a global standard, a global monitoring campaign, but this global monitoring campaign, again, serves mostly the purpose of this has a research purpose, but it also serves the purpose of having a validation and comparison capacity. But what we want is national countries to do that. So I don't have much more to say. I would actually prefer to leave the room for Cesar because he's coming next. I would just like to, again, like George, thank everyone that participated on this. And I'm really looking forward to extend these training activities to many more countries and to provide, again, the knowledge sharing, local and regional knowledge sharing. What we want is Africans talking to Africans, Americans talking to Americans, and then sharing experiences, of course, but to have local capacity built in a way that in the future we will not see these maps anymore where half of the world is blank and the other half is somehow colored. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Thanks,
And
Carlos.
yeah.
I'm gonna unmute George and open the floor for questions. We still have some minutes. I do see a question from Pilar Hernandez. Is seed bank biodiversity being considered? I don't know when exactly that question was sent, but it was during George's talk.
Could you repeat? I'm trying to find here in the
She's asking
chat.
if seed bank biodiversity is
Seed
being considered. Yes.
Carlos, I'll let you answer that right now. It's not in any of the tiers that we've included in the FAO thing, but I'm not sure what soil bonds
Yeah.
activities are related to that.
I can quickly say, so we don't at the moment, apart from let's say specific soil organisms, let's say bacteria, fungi, and so on, and animals, the only thing that we consider below ground extra is roots. So currently there is no aspect related to seed banks, although, for example, there were some conversations in the past to again, locally identify and sieve these seeds, because in some cases it's a good indicator of invasion. For example, in invaded systems, typically the seed bank is used by that. But currently we don't use that.
Thank you. I see another question by Carlo Giacomini. He's saying he hasn't received any message or questionnaire from Glossoland. So who he should be in contact with?
Yeah, Filippo Benedetti is the person who we've been working with at Glossolan, and they had sent out originally to all the Glossolan labs an initial assessment of soil biodiversity variables that were performed in those labs. but then we had an update to that questionnaire, which I sent a while back, and I'm not sure what the status of that is now. But Filippo is the access point for Glosolan, and for sure, if that hasn't been sent out, there will be some assessment later on, so that we can see how we can best assist the Glosolan labs to expand their capacity to perform measurements of other soil biodiversity variables as well.
You, George. Okay, remember the floor is open, and now is the time for members to come forward, talk about the priorities for the working group, and plan for the next 2 years. Sorry, I'm just admitting people and looking at the chat and trying to do all here. So if you see any questions that I missed, please.
Yeah, I see one question that came in just now regarding training opportunities. As Carlos mentioned, the objective is that there are already some training videos online, both of Glosolan and some other and of soil bond, for instance. If you want to become more involved in soil bond or measuring some of the variables of soil bond, there are already some videos up there. I'll let you respond to that if you want, Carlos, a bit more.
Yeah, I would just like to say that. So right now we are in the process of identifying or let's say organizing this training. So there's at least the one that I was referring to. I cannot point you specifically to any specific place that you can register or so on. But having said that, I think the best way to approach this is to contact your either local or international FAO contact and say that you are in country X and you are happy to join or that you want to join these type of trainings, because this is also a way of assessing necessities. And as I said, we have a specific target in terms of countries right now, and this is also because of budget constraints. But the idea is to, when possible, allow others to come to these trainings. And if you are from one of these regions, we would try our best to include you. So right now we cannot point you to a place, but as soon as we are able to do that, I guess that Carlos Barreto, that you would be able to send an email, at least to our colleagues in these regions, to come. Yeah.
Thank you. Questions about Glossolan should be directed to Filippo. Filippo, I put his email here and also the website. He would be the one responsible for sending the survey and also updating you on the status of the activities. I see a comment from Patrick Laval about global indicators of soil macro invertebrate communities. I haven't seen that myself. Thanks for sharing, Patrick. Anyone else? We have another minute before we bring Cesar over to speak a little bit. Great. Okay, yeah, I just would like members to continue interacting through the chat and um, I don't know what that message is from Cynthia. Um, okay, so I am gonna unmute you, Cesar, and I'm gonna present your slides. Are you there, Cesar?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay. Let me just share your slides. One
yes.
sec. Okay. So Cesar, as I said, is the elected new vice chair for Working Group 1, and you have 5 minutes, Cesar.
Okay, hello everyone. And many thanks for this opportunity and for electing me. I'm Cesar Marin. I'm a full professor in the University of St. Thomas in southern Chile. And in particular with soil bond, I have been involved since the beginning, since 2018. So it's very nice to move from uh, to continue in this work with these very nice people. Can you go to the next one, please? So this is just a brief reminder of what Carlos presented yesterday, maybe uh, for some people that didn't saw this presentation regarding the methods and objectives of Working Group 1 for the next couple of years, which is the time in which I will be the vice chair. Basically develop these indicators, development of capacity building of two different countries and develop protocols as just as George just presented. And very importantly, establish this network of soil biodiversity monitoring in the long term. Can you go to the next one? So I think that for the next couple of years, the most important thing is to continue uh, this process and these two main um, aspects that George just presented. First, the guidebook on soil biodiversity methods for GLOSOB monitoring. And this implies to organize and harmonize the standard operating procedures, further advancing the writing and editing of these many chapters, and also coordinate with the editorial and requirements of GLOSOB and GSP and FAO in general. And the second big thing I think is the interaction and harmonization with Glossoland. Um, and basically, as George said, if there are many things already done, we don't need to do them again. So we need to harmonize across all these different initiatives. Can you go to the next one? I would also like to start focus on filling national gaps, and for that, um, the GSP, the FAO needs to send a reminder to GSP and CBD local points about GLOSOB and how to getting involved in this monitoring. Um, a couple of years ago, I published this article at the national scale showing the gaps on ecosystem functioning and soil biodiversity at the national scale. And will be very nice to either following those search terms or the search terms by this working group to make a call to NETSOB members to do something similar to have like a national impact. And in October, I was in Cali in the COP16, and they presented this species protection index. And sadly, it's based only in vertebrates and in plants. But we already have a lot of data on soil microbial biodiversity, so it will be very nice to also do something similar based on those data. And um, the last one. And many thanks to the outstanding work of George, Carlos, and all the scientific committee and all NETSO members. And this is my contact information. Many thanks.
Thank you, Cesar, and welcome to Working Group 1. Um, I just sent everyone a message here in the chat asking about priorities that Working Group 1 should focus, in addition to these ones that Cesar already identified. So if you have more points to be brought forward to the GSP plenary in June, please add them here. Um, okay, so that was working group number 1. Moving forward, we have working group, the progress of working group number 2. We have Zoe and Jeff talking about the article that they worked on and also results of the survey. I'm going to ask Zoe first to unmute themselves. Good. Is Jeff sharing the screen?
Jeff should be sharing the screen.
Okay. Are you around, Jeff? I have your slides too if you need me. Oh, okay. Get started.
Great. Okay. Well, thank you so much. So working group 2 spent the past 4 years focusing on best practices to conserve and protect soil biodiversity. Next slide, please. So our overall objective has been to identify the best practices that seek to reduce soil disturbance, maintain soil structure, and prevent soil erosion. These are the physical aspects. Reduce fertilizer, pesticide, other chemical changes to the soil systems, or the chemical aspects. Prevent and control invasive species, pests, pathogens, and soil-borne diseases, otherwise the biological aspects. And then also to maintain, enhance, and diversify soil organic matter inputs. So progress towards these goals have been extensive through consultation with Working Group 2 Participatory Network, which has almost 500 participants. We've identified 33 potential best practices. These have been incorporated into a global questionnaire, and alternate co-chair Dr. Battigelli will present the results of this survey in just a moment. We've also launched a call for case studies in which we've received 32 case study contributions. These are being edited and they will be bundled as an FAO document. And we've finally written a review article that is soon to be out. It's published in the virtual special issue on soil organisms on the interconnected threats of soil biodiversity, or what we're calling the threat work. So the threat work is a precursor to understanding best practices. So here we sought to understand mechanisms that lead to soil biodiversity loss, identify the primary threats and stressors, and examine the indirect effects, the cascading threats, and the interactions among these factors. This is because multiple threats composed of multiple stressors are acting simultaneously, such that they form a network of interconnected threats to soil biodiversity that we call the threat work. Although these threats may differ among various geographic regions, the majority of them predominantly stem from the anthropogenic land use activities and management practices, such as intensive agriculture, urbanization, deforestation, and resource extraction and industrial activities that lead to soil pollution, soil erosion, and soil compaction. The most substantial indicator of degraded soil and a common threat to soil biodiversity is loss of soil organic matter, which is also highly connected to some of these other threats. So soil organic matter is essential for creating a favorable environment for soil biodiversity. This is through enhancing nutrient availability, water retention, as well as soil structure. So those physical, chemical, and biological aspects. Losses in soil organic matter are closely tied to the mechanisms of soil biodiversity loss, as it alters the physical, chemical, and biological soil attributes, leading to biodiversity decline. So knowledge on these interconnected threats can help identify priority areas for restoration and inform best practices to conserve soil biodiversity. Soil organic matter is a central node in the threat work affecting soil biodiversity, and it's key to designing the effective strategies to conserve and protect soil biodiversity. So I'm going to hand it over now to Jeff, who's going to present the results of our global survey.
Thanks, Zoe. The floor is yours, Jeff.
Great. Thank you, Carlos. Is working, the microphone?
Yeah, you're good.
Brilliant. So thanks so much for this. I'm going to talk about the survey that we started looking at best practices for and the impacts on soil biodiversity. The general idea was to try to gather information on what was being done in various regions around the globe, looking at what's happening at a landscape level and what the different management practices impacts might be having on soil biodiversity below ground. We defined a best practice as something that is attainable, that can be used across various different soil types, different ecoregions, and different land management regimes. Something that looks at a mechanism and how that is going to impact the soil biodiversity below ground and how it might influence activity above ground. Is it something that can be used to meet different goals for productivity or sustainability as a long-term practice? And what impact is it going to have on soil biodiversity? Is it going to support, maintain, enhance, or degrade the below ground activity? And then we're looking at, as part of the survey, trying to integrate information on socio-political and economic factors with land management systems to get an understanding of how it's going to impact a larger global perspective. We started with the idea of not necessarily looking for studies that were scientific projects, but we're looking for more of on boots on the ground sort of studies, trying to get information or processes presented to folks that might not have access to science, but want to see what can be done at a local level. We tried to develop questions that were focused at a smaller scale with the expectation that some of these practices might be expanded in different areas or to larger systems. And just to get an idea or a starting point for people who are curious about how their different practices might be influencing soil biodiversity in their regions. We sent the survey out to all the members of NETSOB. We sent it out on social media as well. And it's still open at this point in time. The information I'm going to present to you today is from December 2024, when we pulled the survey results at that point. So we launched the survey last year on the International Day of Biodiversity, May 22nd. We sent it out to all the NETSOB members. It was posted on various social media platforms. We presented the links at different conferences and events. And as of December 10th, we had 159 responses. 116 of those responses actually were addressing soil biodiversity. 9 were not sure if they made it or not, but we included them anyways. And this is kind of the distribution of the responses that we had. So fairly good representation globally, a little light for Near East and Northern Africa and the Southwest Pacific, but on whole, pretty good representation of what's going on. We asked folks how their work or their practice was related to the 12 main threats of soil biodiversity outlined in the State of Knowledge from 2020. And happily, all 12 threats were acknowledged as being studied at some point. The 3 big ones that we thought were of interest, looking at agricultural intensification, loss of organic matter and organic carbon content, and climate change. Everyone was allowed to select more than one response here, so you'll see some of the numbers, they're not going to add up to 100. We then wanted to know what people were doing with respect to methodology for extracting or assessing the taxa they were looking at. These are the top ones here. The one by far being the most prominent was genomics work, and that kind of relates to the dominant group of organisms that people were looking at. We also wanted to know what was being done to assess biodiversity, and we had a list of different methods to assess the organisms or taxa that were being looked at. Dominant indicators or assessment forms are going to be abundance, looking at richness or number of taxa, and then relative abundance, looking at community structure. There were a number of indirect methods that were being used, which gives us an indication of what's going on, but with respect to diversity, really kind of leaves us a little bit in the dark there. So it's kind of interesting to see this being done, but I think there's a lot of more interesting work to be done looking at what organisms are doing, what activity in those indirect methods. We wanted to see what groups people were studying, so we broke it down into different sizes of organisms, microbial taxa, About 81% of the respondents were assessing microbial organisms, the bacteria and fungi being the dominant groups there. Looking at microfauna, about 62% of the respondents were looking at microfauna, with nematodes being the dominant group in that area. The megafauna, only 32% of folks identified assessing that taxa in their studies, with vertebrates being the dominant organism there. Looking at mesofauna, about 56% of the respondents were looking at mesofauna, microarthropods being identified as the dominant group being assessed, also the acri or mites, and then collembola and springtails as well. The last group, the macrofauna, about 50% of the respondents looking at macrofauna, dominant groups here looking at the arthropods, and then the oligochaetes or earthworms from those sites. One of the things that we haven't really looked at in depth when people were identifying arthropods in general or microarthropods in general, if that's the level of taxonomy they were stopping at, or whether they went further with their studies. So that's something that we'd probably like to take a look at a little more going forward. We also wanted to know what physical strategies people were dealing with in their studies. Most of them really weren't looking at any physical measurements or physical mechanisms. There were a variety of different components, not a lot of work being done with physical impacts there. What sort of biological practices were being employed? Again, not a lot with respect to biological management, although there were some indications with earthworm inoculation, nitrogen fixing, bacteria application, and use of biocontrol agents and other bioinoculants that could prove interesting depending upon what's being done there. We asked about nutrient responses or nutrient inputs. 118 people responded with those. A number of things going on here. About a quarter of the folks weren't using any augmentation of nutrient inputs. However, about 70% were looking at compost application and manure additions to their research. So that's kind of interesting. Again, looking at the lack of organic matter or the addition of organic matter in the systems to see what's going to happen with the organisms there. We asked about alternate tillage regimes. And again, not about 34%, 35%, not really looking at alternative tillage regimes. However, no-till and reduced-till were dominant responses for a lot of the survey respondents. We noticed the term tillage used in a variety of different ways. So tillage showed up, different types of tillage, and they're all kind of they're all looking at disturbing the system in some fashion. So we do need to define what the term tillage means, but basically there is a lot of different types of tillage regimes being applied in these systems. We asked if anyone was looking at grazing systems, and not many were. About 61% were not looking at grazing systems, although there were different smaller scale studies being done in different components or different types of grazing activities. And we also looked at ask questions about cropping regimes, just to see what people were doing there. Not a lot of change in alternative cropping regimes. However, we did see cover cropping and crop rotations as two dominant responses by the survey folks. And then agroforestry as well as another type of cropping regime associated with activities on the landscape. We wanted to know what the general impact or response of soil biodiversity was for the land management practices. And we did see about 44% identifying a positive response, so an increase in the richness or abundance of the organisms they were studying. Another 40% showing a variable response depending upon the time of year that it was being assessed or the different sites that were being assessed for those projects. About 8% identified no change and 7% were looking at a negative response. Other responses that were documented with the studies that were indicated a 60% reduction in soil disturbance or maintaining soil structure or preventing erosion on those sites. 80% identified maintenance or enhancement of soil organic matter and soil organic matter inputs on their sites. About 70% reduce the amount of fertilizer or pesticide or other chemical inputs associated with their management practice. And about 40% acknowledged prevention or control of invasive species or pests or pathogens associated with their management practice. We asked about other outcomes with respect to soil parameters on the studies that were being reported on. We found pH and salinity, soil pollution, soil compaction, and soil sealing weren't really assessed during most of the studies, so they tended not to be applied, although when they were assessed, we tended to see a positive outcome, neutralizing pH, reducing salinity, reducing pollution and compaction and soil sealing on those sites. The dominant ones where we see that were being assessed with positive inputs, nutrient status was increased with a lot of the practices being done, reduced erosion, soil erosion on sites, increased soil organic matter and soil organic carbon contents, and increased soil water holding capacity as a result of the practices that were being used. We did want to know the cost of the practices that were being used on those sites, and we found that most of the practices were either much cheaper than conventional practices, somewhat less expensive than practices currently being used, so about 50, 60% there. 20, 30% were similar in price to what was conventionally being used, some, about 14%, being slightly more expensive. And that kind of related to the next question we were asking about what the potential was for applying or adopting the practice being used and whether it would be easy for it to be adopted in other areas. So 50% of the respondents were applying that would be relatively easy for their practice to be deployed in different areas. And we also asked about scaling up of the various practices. About 60% replied that their practice would be relatively easy to scale up to a larger landscape and deploy that on sites. We also asked at the end about linking the practice that was being deployed on site to the sustainability development goals from the UN. And we allowed folks to select all that applied to their study. And we found that all of them were being assessed in some component. The dominant ones identified were zero hunger, good health and well-being, climate action, and life on the land. So that was basically what we've gone through. Like I mentioned before, we are still looking for more studies and more respondents to our survey. If you're looking at some sort of land management practice and you're assessing soil biodiversity, please click on the link or scan the QR code and take the survey. We are looking for more studies that address or use traditional ecological knowledge. And we are looking for more studies in the East and Northern Africa regions, as well as the Southwest Pacific, in order to enhance those areas as well. Tentatively, we're looking at closing the survey on April 15th, but do take a chance to scan that QR code if you know of someone else that might have some interesting information to help us with the survey results. That would be greatly appreciated. At that point, that's what's going on with the soil survey results. So I'm going to stop there.
Okay. Thank you, Jeff. Everyone, now the floor is open for questions and for comments. If you have identified priorities for Working Group 2 to focus on in the next term, please bring them forward. We need this interaction with the members and this feedback as well. I see one comment from Victoria, Zoe, and Jeff. I'm gonna unmute both of you just in case you have seen that in the results of the surveys in any of the studies. Let me just unmute you, Jeff.
Mhm. So Jeff, I'm not sure if you can comment. The question is, or they say, it would be interesting to see how many looked at earthworm species or stopped just simply at abundance, biomass, or ecotype. I'm not sure that our survey has that fine scale level of information.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I was trying to mention in a lot of the groups that we were identifying. We did say, oh, did you look at earthworms? Did you look at arthropods? Did you look at vertebrates? So it wasn't clear that way to define the level of taxonomy, but I think that's something interesting to look at because different areas have different taxonomic skill sets. So it's something I think we'd like to pursue further just to see how that's going to play out with the information from working group 1 and the training that's going to go on there. What level of taxonomic identification do you need to assess soil function? That's a really interesting question.
Thank you, Jeff. Just going through the comments here. Does anyone have any suggestions on working group 2 based on all the activities I listed NETSOB being responsible for in relation to the CBD mandate? Is there anything you would like to see us working on in these next 2 years? The idea of the network is not that we just pick and do what we want. It's actually to receive this feedback and to hear about the needs from different countries. So if there's anything that you feel like Zoe, Jeff, and I have missed in the last 20 to 30 minutes, that would be good.
Perhaps, Jeff, we can put a link to the survey in the chat.
Yep, I can go and hunt that up right now.
Yeah. So Patrick also suggests that separate the native from invasives.
An excellent point, Patrick. Yes, I totally agree.
Also, feel free to speak out so I can unmute you, Patrick, and then because I know typing is not the most effective way to put your thoughts out there. Would you like me to unmute you, Patrick? Yeah, that is a good point, Patrick. And it's also something that GLOSOB has been aware of, is how to make sure that fauna is included, but at a level that non-taxonomists could work on and that the data could be reported by each one of the member countries. And definitely species level identification is not something that can be achieved. Oh, that's a really good question, Lorenzo. Um, yes, that is the level that is being discussed, Patrick, is something that the order is visually and usually okay to be done by non-scientists.
So perhaps to follow up on Lorenzo's comment, so in particular, the survey was meant to capture non-scientific research. So rather than going to the published literature on these best practices. We wanted to hear about small scale, local scale, boots on the ground scale studies or just general practices. What were people doing? So these are not scientific studies. That's why a lot of the questions and responses were qualitative rather than quantitative. It allowed people who perhaps do not have the expertise to just generally share their observations and their comments. We do actually have planned a scoping survey literature review to to address what is actually published in the literature as well. Exactly. So Harriet, innovation towards farmer user friendly soil assessment apps or tools. Farmers know a lot about their soil since they do a lot on farm research. Absolutely. We wanted to speak with people that are actually using the land and what they're doing.
And on that note, Harriet, this is not about soil biodiversity, at least yet, but there is a project called Rec Soil. So it deals with recurbanization of former agricultural sites. That is an FAO initiative as well, and they do have an app for data to be reported in the field. So you might want to take a look at that. At the moment, the app does not allow biodiversity data to be collected. It's just not ready for it yet as a platform. But I would just like to show you that this is in the works. Somehow I put the link of news, and if you are an Android user, this is the link for the app per se, and it's just called Rexoil. So I can't comment if that is available for Apple users yet because I haven't used the app myself.
Is working group 2 also looking at urban soils?
That's a really good question. It's one of the things we're going to talk about going forward for the next level of things. There's a lot of focus was on agricultural systems, but I see a lot of agricultural practices that are applied in various settings, whether it's reclamation, remediation, and urban settings as well, Cairo. So that's definitely something we'll look at adding to the list.
Just another program I would like to highlight that people might not be aware is the I'll put the link here, but there's an FAO program where farmers get trained by FAO personnel and then they become trainers. And there are lots of, it's called soil doctors. There are lots of activities. There has been some interest in adding the soil biodiversity component to it. So there are posters, there's a map as well, and some numbers, some educational material. If you have any ideas of biological parameters to be added to this program, I am welcome to. I welcome your comments. You can email me about it. I am. There is two right now. Just one is about roots observation, and one is about earthworm counting. So remember, these are farmers that do not possess taxonomical, excuse me, knowledge, yet they are very interested in knowing about the health of their soils and about whether their practices are sustainable or not. So this is also something that I have got involved with since I joined FAO last September. I see a comment about Mohammed. From Mohammed, please write me an email about a certificate if you need one, and I can arrange that for you. Thank you. Okay. I don't see any more questions. This is your last moment in to speak up about working group number 2. Otherwise, please keep populating the chat with comments and questions. We do have 10 minutes break now. And after the break, Jeff himself will talk again about his work plan for the next term. And then we'll proceed with the progress report from working group 3. And then Raj has some words as well to share with us. So I'll see you in now 9 minutes. And okay, everyone. Just going through the chat. I don't see any new unaddressed comments or questions. So now that we're back from break, I will pass the floor again to Jeff as the newly elected vice chair for Working Group 2. So Jeff can share some of his ideas and the work plan for the next term. One sec, Jeff, because I have to find you in the list to unmute you. Okay.
Okay, did that work?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, folks, for the opportunity to carry on with working in Working Group 2. It has been a real pleasure for the last few years working with Zoe and the rest of the group, looking at soil biodiversity, and I'm very happy to be able to carry on with the Working Group 2 ideas and goals for the next couple of years. I think one of the things we'd like to do, especially with the survey results, in addition to publishing that information once we've completed that at the end of April, is to develop some sort of written document, manual, some piece of information coming from the FAO, identifying the different case studies, the different soil practices that have been used in the past as a resource for landowners, land managers, and farmers to go and look and see what's being done in their areas and how that might be applied to their sites. I would like to see it expanded, as some folks have identified, in different areas. So going from agricultural settings into urban settings, into reclamation and remediation of various industrial sites and resource extraction areas. And that tends to be something that is blissfully ignored in most environments because we're looking more at physical or chemical parameters in the soils, not so much the biological component there. So I see a lot of potential to expand the different practices and management works being done in those environments, and then providing a way to start integrating the various components of soil functions. The biodiversity is all of these little bits and pieces below ground, looking at decomposition, nutrient cycling, and soil formation. How do we start putting the pieces back together for that below ground ecosystem so that it functions well and maintain the biodiversity that is below ground needed for that system to work? So one of the things that I hope to do, or at least to start, is putting the puzzle pieces back together to get a better understanding of what's happening below ground, how things are going to recover from disturbance or impact, and what that community might look like from a baseline perspective, and then going forward from short-term responses into long-term assessments of what's happening in those below ground systems with various practices being applied to the soils. Looking forward to engaging with the NETSOB membership. I know in the past it's been spotty at times. And what I would really like to see is more engagement. So to provide more information to the newsletter that Carlos has got going for the network, and to provide that interaction with members if they've got ideas, if they've got examples of different practices that are being done and they're assessing the soil biota, to get that information out to the network and get it better known and provide those resources to different regions globally, so people know what's going on and they can figure out what's going to work best in their system, because has been identified previously, soils are different in different places all over the world. So what works best in one place is not necessarily going to work well in some other place. And there are a number of different ways that we can go about trying different components to see what's going to work best. So yeah, I look forward to working with all the new chairs going forward, and hopefully we get some interesting dialogue going and provide some interesting information for folks going forward. Thank you again for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. Look forward to the next couple of years.
Yeah, Jeff. Does anyone have any comments, any questions for Jeff? Okay. Oh, there you go. Two really good questions, actually.
Excellent. So I'm sorry, Elena, I'm a little lacking in my acronyms. So VGSSM is, and with respect to, again, trying to publish and voluntary guidelines of sustainable swimming. Oh, okay, very good. Yeah, how best to spread information. Part of what we're hoping to do with the results of the survey and the case studies that we're going to use is to provide that as a publication to send out through FAO websites. Bring it to conferences and deliver it. If you're going to a conference next year in April in Victoria, the Global Soil Biodiversity Conference would be a good place to spread that information. Tara, a very good question. Carlos, people can send emails to you.
Yeah, so it depends on the activity. When you join NETSOB, you self-identify which working group you're more interested in becoming part of. But then it's up to the vice chair and the alternate to initiate the conversation, asking for help and for feedback on publications or for collaboration opportunities. And yes, I can provide the vice chairs of the working groups with a list of the members and their contact information. The members could also contact thanks, Cairo, for the link. The members could also contact Jeff in this case, in this example, if it is working group 2 that Tara is talking about. Thank you. Okay. Next, we have Gianluca Bagnara and Rosalina Gonzalez. Um, I saw Gianluca. Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you.
I'm gonna unmute you first, Gianluca.
Thank you.
Are you able to share your screen, Gianluca, or would you like
Yes.
me to?
Let me try.
Okay. So Gianluca is the vice chair with Rosalina Gonzalez of current working group 3, and they will talk about the progress on the economics and policies related to soil biodiversity. Yes, now we see it.
Can you see my slides?
Yes, in full mode, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank
Thank
you.
you. You
Thank
have
you.
25 minutes, Gianluca and Rosalina.
I would like to thank all of you. I would like to thank George, Zoe, and Jeff for the collaboration since our work started with a very close collaboration for the working group 1 and working group 2, since we need to have information index on what is going on inside the soil, what is going on in terms of practices affecting the quality of biodiversity in the soil, and then we managed to address some economics evaluation. And Rosalina, on the other side, also political implication or policy that can imply and affect the economics of the biodiversity of soil. Well, the first question is, we came out with a draft white paper addressing this issue. So this presentation is just an extract of the first result of the two working groups. In the beginning, we were separate, working group 2 and 3 in economics and 4 in policy. But for two main reasons, we decided to merge together. The first one, we were a very small group, and so we need to have critical mass to work together and to share ideas. And so, and second one is economics and policy are very close together, since this issue is affecting their market, but also regulated market. So there's a very close interaction between policy and market value. When we talk about soil biodiversity, we mainly address also the idea that we address biodiversity toward the idea also of organic carbon inside the soil. Since today the market of organic carbon is quite large, common in the world, and so we managed also to see the connection and links between soil biodiversity and organic market. But the two main perimeter are delimiting our area of activity. One is inside our land, the other one is outside. That means in situ soil services, when we talk about soil services in situ, that means inside our, let's say, farm, we manage our private interest, private good. Outside, we can affect also the external interest in terms of consumer, geographic boundary, and larger interest in involving the population or the consumer as well. And so the first critical point is we must have a soil that is alive to produce. Does the soil has an interest, economic interest? Well, let's say yes, because for few main reasons. The soil is a limited good. We cannot build new soil like a car, like apartment, and so it's limited. And so it can be traded, yes, it can be traded. And what is affecting the value of soil is the quality of soil. So soil biodiversity is a very important issue to provide a quality of soil for the private interest as a farmer to produce, or the public interest as a common benefit in terms of health, health, or in terms of recreation and so on. And there are close there is a network of connection between ecosystem services and human being for related to the soil and the ecosystem that the soil can provide through biodiversity. First is, of course, we mentioned the production. Today, the climate is affecting a lot the capability of soil to produce food. That is a starting point for all of us. And so affecting the well-being of food security to health, good food in terms of quality for our health, so food security and food safety. Also, the social relation related to our production, our economic ecosystem services. And so the soil is the starting point for many economic interests. The discussion is, can we measure it? How can we measure it in terms of final market? Ecosystem can provide services and good for ecological value based on sustainability, social cultural value based on our perception of the value, personal interest in culture or perception of the quality. And the last one is the final economic value based on efficiency and cost effectiveness of our ecosystem good. This is the total value we can have from the soil. The biodiversity inside the soil, affecting the quality of soil. So to assess the change in benefit provided by the ecosystem service, we need to involve the human activity, of course. And Zoe and Jeff provided some inside the practices affecting the quality of soil. So we need to assess the cost and the benefit, improve also the awareness of the society toward the benefit we can get from the soil in order to have a final market. Since we can decide to promote policy to have a more regulated market or to stimulate the market, but at the end of the story, we need to promote demand and supply of this kind of the value. So the total economic value of our ecosystem services provided by the biodiversity is related to the use of this value or non-use of the value. So entering in the tools to measure is we can address non-monetary evaluation techniques through survey, through interview focus group, and so on. That's more related to the qualitative issue, or the monetary evaluation techniques to estimate the real social preference in terms of willingness to pay. I want to pay more for this quality. I want to pay less because the quality is too poor for my standards. Or willingness to accept a negative issue. From my point of view, I can have a cost on the soil in terms of losing. I don't care about biodiversity or other quality issue of the soil, so I can offset some cost. That is the other face of the same coin in economic point of view. And so entering from the economic perspective through entering in what kind of techniques we can use for such an evaluation, we can have three categories. That is direct market evaluation, preferences, revealed preferences, and stated preferences. When we talk about economic direct market evaluation, we talk about price, proxy of the market, production, less cost or replacement cost or damage. The limit of this one is related in the transaction cost that we cannot measure directly, and the availability of data. When we talk about techniques related to the preferences, revealed preferences, we travel cost or hedonic price, method based on expressed value or inner value inside the quality of our good. And it's not clear the imperfection of this market, the real monitoring and services, but this one, the hedonic price, could be a good approach, at least in my view, when we have a final market with a common price. In this case, we managed to address the biodiversity inside the same formula of the carbon market. in order to since the carbon market is a worldwide market, we have a trade-off, and it's a broad market with internet, no boundary between the countries. This is a first experiment. We managed to merge the evaluation of biodiversity inside the formula algorithm to evaluate the accumulation of carbon, organic carbon inside the soil. That's the objective is to mainstream the value of soil biodiversity into the carbon market and soil stock of organic carbon. So the econometric, this econometric scheme is based on the inner value of the single component of our soil. Just briefly to express the criteria. We have a baseline of the carbon stock inside our soil. We have a perspective of a capability to accumulate, to stock carbon in the soil, not just to capture, also to stock in a long term, at least 10 years. And this algorithm is based on the balance between what we can catch, what the carbon we can catch from the air through our plant. Plant is a vehicle to catch carbon from the air and fix in the soil. Of course, when we harvest, we take away some part of this carbon, and so the difference is what is stocked in the soil. The biodiversity is a sustainable criteria here, is included in this formula as a sustainability criteria. Is measured, is estimated, not measured, as a difference between organic matter and carbon, organic carbon. I was glad that is an issue emerged also from the investigation of Zoe and Jeff from their survey. So we are quite in line with the previous group 1 and 2. And so the interaction of biodiversity with the capability to capture organic carbon inside the soil is a measure of the sustainability to stock in long term our organic carbon inside the soil. That is a key role of biodiversity. The final issue, the economic value, is the value of a carbon credit we can put in the international market. This is an economic approach based on hedonic value. Is one criteria. It's not the total portfolio of tools we can have in the economics, since the economic value depends on the perspective, the final relation with the final demand as a consumer, or a consumer of good, or consumer or benefit from the quality of soil. But this is an approach quite consistent with the international market of quality of environmental and capital, natural capital we can have right now in the world. And I pass from this point. I pass to Rosalina. The point, since we are entering in the policy issue in order to address, to support this kind of market, to promote it, or to regulate it. And so, Rosalina, please. Thank you.
Gianluca, could you hear me? Yep, okay. Gianluca was talking about the economic side of this group. It's not easy to manage this area because they are very closely, and we found that.
Sorry, Rosalina. Gianluca, you stopped presenting.
Gianluca, could you put the presentation, please?
We could see your screen, but not in presentation mode before.
Shall I present for you, or do you prefer to manage by yourself, Rosalina?
Could you present for me, please?
Okay, sure. Just a second. I'm gonna. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you. And presentation mode, please. It's not in presentation mode yet.
Does it work?
No, yes, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry, Rosalina, go ahead.
Okay. Okay. I was talking that I was telling you that it's not easy to manage this area because there are a few regulations in different countries. Mostly there are software, no specific related to soil biodiversity. And we found that when we combine this area with the economic, we can move forward, we can move faster.
Um,
In first place,
so sorry to interrupt again, Rosalina. It's really hard to hear you. If you could speak a little bit louder, please.
okay. Is better now?
A little
Is
better,
better now?
yes.
You can hear me? Okay. Okay. And we found that we can manage some things. First one is the social versus private benefits. And in this part, people is asking people, for example, for working group two, related to manage something. So they are asking about what is the cost to make those manage soil biodiversity in my farm, for example. So we combine this because there are some benefits from governments or would have to invest in some practices to improve soil biodiversity. So in this case, there are a large social benefits, and in addition, we can have public policies related to environmental or different activities related to soil biodiversity. We are combining sustainability and soil biodiversity because now we are managing in different countries the sustainable goals, and the idea is to relate those ones. And those approaches are related to soil biodiversity and economics and policy. So we have to provide adequate incentives to farmers or different activities related to soil for conservation and provision for related ecosystem services. Continue, Gianluca, please. Next one.
Next one. Is okay?
No, yeah, now. We are promoting the ecosystem services in the market model because we can show people, since farmers and policymakers, how we can obtain better results in terms of environmental, in terms of soil biodiversity, and in terms of economics. This is one thing that we are looking for when we are talking with people, when we are share these things, and we talk with policymakers. So there are public payment schemes operated directly by central government in favor of some topics, managers, industries, etc. And we can talk with those guys how we can improve soil biodiversity, but this is good for all, include economics. And we have the private payment schemes when people are looking for obtain profit when you are using some good things. For example, this Monday I was talking with a people who has a big farm with a lot of cows. And now they are using some bio solution to improve soil. And they are trying to demonstrate that this is better than than when you manage the animals without this biodiversity, this soil biodiversity. In fact, they was looking for contract a soil biodiversity expert to demonstrate that thing. And they are obtaining good profits. So this is now changing, but they are so related. and public and private funding schemes that use public and private funds to ensure provision of ecosystem services. Continue, please, Gianluca. We work together with George in the global survey on soil biodiversity, and we found that there are some information, academic research, but when we ask about government law research, there are a few limited web page, and most of them are regional regulation or frame regulation. There are no specific policy related to soil biodiversity. Um, we found soil conservation laws and regulations that protect soil, and that are related to soil biodiversity in an indirect way. So many countries now have regulation even for soil. So this is so bad. But even for soil biodiversity, less. We only found the European community, so this is the final information that I'm going to tell you that we are using as baseline. And we have established a regulatory system. We had talking with FAO in the legal area. They told us that there are no legal definition about soil biodiversity. We have a soil biodiversity definition in the science point of view, but it's difficult for policymakers to understand what or why this is very important to protect or to regulate. That was a high discussion about that, and we have to organize that definition and to put limits to use this and to move on into a frame from FAO to policymakers related to soil biodiversity. And continue, please, Luca. So the only complete document that we found as a baseline is from European Union related to soil biodiversity report, and now they are related soil biodiversity to soil degradation, land use management, climate change, chemical pollution, and genetically modified organisms, invasive species. So now we are using this as a baseline, and we try to track some guidelines for other countries. Continue, please. And we need some indicators and monitoring schemes to track soil biodiversity, that is working group 1 and 2. Policy related to soil biodiversity we have to develop. This is mandatory, and we can start with this baseline, showing its results and promoting similar actions in other countries. Continue, please. I think this is the last one. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you both, Rosalina and Gianluca. This is the moment for the members to bring to raise questions or concerns. And I do see a few important comments that I would like either of you to address. So I did ask what are the priorities that members believe Working Group 3 should focus on. And I don't know if you are following the chat, Gianluca and Rosalina. There are some questions. There's one from Ursulia Niarai. Did you see? Policies other than economic, for example, regulatory and information-based policies related to soil biodiversity, including advisory services, education, awareness raising, regulations. Those are all valid points that they believe lies within up in the alley of Working Group 3 priorities for the next term.
Nice
Okay, so
comment.
there's one that I would like either or both of you to address that says a possible priority to translate the knowledge developed and brought to us by working groups 1 and 2 into policies and proposal for policies. So would you like to comment on that? And there's more to the question if you'd like to read it all.
Yeah, from my point of view, yes, thank you for this comment. I really appreciate. Yes, we had to be really connected to working group 1 and 2 as we managed during this year, this first experience in NETSOB, in order to use the indication or index coming from these two groups and feed the economic model, and then make a simulation in order to address also a policy issue, as Rosalina did. To connect these two, the biodiversity inside to include inside the carbon market, yes, we need a long-term storage or carbon, at least 10 years, in my view. The capture could be evaluated on a year base, but the capability to storage it at least 10 years. And that's why is one could be one next step in our experience here, in order to move from the theoretical analysis and evaluation, enter in a more experimental side in order to validate this model. But please pay attention. This is just one model that we feel is very close to the market, very operative, practical, linking biodiversity in soil and the potential market with money inside. But we need also to explore the theoretical issue related to other economic techniques, as we just presented in the portfolio, and then simulate also the policy issue or propose policy issue to support this kind of market.
Okay, we have, and I apologize. I know we will go a little bit over time here, but I believe this is really important, especially because of, like Tara, like I mentioned yesterday, and Tara just reiterated. No, Tara, it's not intentional that working group 3 has fewer members than working groups 1 and 2. That is something that we are trying to revert back to have a better representation and have more people to share ideas like you all are doing in here. I do not believe it's lack of interest, but I do believe it could be lack of expertise or people not being aware of policies related to soil biodiversity. So definitely brainstorm is needed here. I see Cesar just on the, I'll skip Irene for now, but just what Cesar said, that maybe we should bring lawyers to this conversation. We do have Giacomo Rocchegiani working with us with a law background, and Giacomo has been working with us, helping on this white paper that Gianluca brought up and presented. So that is a really good point, Cesar. We are aware of that, and luckily we have that the backstop and that different point of view. Now there's a question for Rosalina from Dr. Irene Hauser. Sorry, I'll mute you, Rosalina. How do you believe you would like to change the current situation of missing legal instruments? How do you see that happening?
I think we can start with the communication, with a strong communication to different levels. Start with children, university people, scientists, but most important, general population, to show them the importance of soil biodiversity. And with those critical mass, we can push forward the policy. I think that this is a good idea. For example, in my country, in the last election, I was talking with my students and I said, hey, which of them talk about soil? Because with soil, we have the vital function. We have to, who of them are talking about that? Who of them knows about soil biodiversity? Why not? And we have to show people what is the importance, and then we can push more. But I found that when we relate those with economics, we have something where people say, what are you talking? Why are you telling us? Because I said, if you protect this, you can produce food with high quality, for example, organic. And when you have an organic, maybe you have a good profit. So this is like something when we can when people can see you and hear you. So this is one idea that I have, and as you said, I believe that children is very important because if we tell them, we teach them that soil biodiversity is vital for all people, you can have those guys that when they are older make some good things.
Thank you. Gianluca, there are two comments from Cairo Rob you might want to address.
Let's see. Okay, and a question reporting is more a comment. Yeah. Yeah, good. Yeah. CDB, COP15, yeah. Essential legal. I would like, yes, please, Cairo Rab, if you can join our group, I will be really glad because we need to enlarge our group and with good competencies. So if you are interested, thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. There's one from Catherine von Stackelberg now.
Is multinational agrochemical companies. Yeah, well, right, promoting seed and agriculture inputs or seed or fertilizer agriculture input. Well, but we need also to address a proper use of seed since when we talk about technology-based and seed or other agricultural inputs, we talk about huge capital. But if the soil is poor, we run the risk to lose productivity. Many countries like in Italy now, the total factor productivity agricultural inputs is negative. So if we can put more inputs like use high quality seed or other agricultural input, but if the soil is dead, we cannot produce more. So we need to work together also with agribusiness companies, since the starting point is the quality of soil. Then we can also exploit better the investment they do. Yeah.
Thanks, Gianluca. Okay. Would you like some more minutes, Gianluca, as the newly elected vice chair to talk about the future? Or have you
briefly
covered?
just thank you all of you supporting me, and since you realize we are working in a kind of frontier of this discipline, connecting biological and physical issue and then market. And so we need first to validate the model we just presented, and then enlarge the portfolio of opportunity. So the third point is very important, to enlarge also our group with more people and good talent. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Gianluca. I will now move to some notes on closing of the session. If nobody else has any questions or comments, I believe, yeah, I do see Braj here. So I'm gonna unmute you now, Braj. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Gianluca, and thanks for all the questions and answers. The floor is yours, Braj.
Thank you, Carlos, and thank you, everybody. We'll start. I think this is time to thank a lot of people, starting with all our speakers and vice chairs, the past and incomings, for very constructive discussions. But thanks mainly to all the participants for their active engagements. And as I said yesterday, we need to keep this going. And your contributions in prioritizing the next deliverables and how to deliver them will be essential for the new and incoming the vice chairs and the sub working groups. Any idea on the suggestions to improve the functioning of NETSOBs or working group, our training program or anything, please do let us know via Carlos. Be assured that every suggestion comes here will be deliberated, and we will look at the feasibility if and how we can implement some of those. I guess before I close this meeting officially, two persons deserves a special thanks. One is Carlos Barretos, and Natalia Rodriguez Aguno for their hard work in scheduling and making sure that everything is done on the times and in an appropriate way. So thank you very much, Carlos and Natalia, to you guys particularly. And as I said, thank you for all of participants for their active contributions, and we look forward to keep working. Thank you, and thank you very much to all.